Welcome to Stumble Upon. I'm Austin.
And I'm Emily. Today we are discussing Sister Sister, written and directed by Bill Condon.
As always, there'll be plenty of fucking spoilers.
But if that doesn't scare you, the alligators might. So keep your hands in the boat and don't piss off the ghosts, because we are in the bayou with some badass sisters. Austin, would you like to give us the synopsis of Sister Sister?
Yeah, absolutely. So the synopsis that I found for Sister Sister is: two sisters turn their family mansion in Louisiana into a guest house. One of their guests is an aide to a congressman and turns their lives inside out.
Did we ever find out what he did?
We do, right off the top. Like outside of his introduction of interrupting Jennifer Jason Leigh's character dancing and chatting with Etienne, the next scene when he's having breakfast, he mentions that he's a congressman's aide.
And you know what? That's pretty on brand.
Yeah, I mean, all the khakis.
Right, well, yeah, between his costume and also just sort of what Congress...
And let me say that it's aged really well, his terrible clothes, with what is worn in Washington, D.C., because
it's pretty on brand.
That uniform hasn't fucking changed.
It hasn't changed. No, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Can
we just find something that's timeless but pleated, and khaki? Can it be timeless? Can that be like a polo shirt? Can you look like you can either go golfing to the country club or enact horrible social change all in one outfit?
We can do that. And I'll definitely make sure to tell you within the first sentence of meeting you what it is I do.
Yeah.
It's pretty on brand.
It's the job equivalent of going to Harvard.
So what you're saying is the synopsis pointed out. No, I picked that up. What we should have all seen as foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Was this is a congressman's aide.
Yeah.
Therefore, you should be afraid.
It's all good rhyme. It's also really like aged well that congressmen have always been terrible. Like people who work it's almost like films and media has been like, hey guys, you know those people who run the country and the people who work for them, they're generally terrible people.
So foreshadowing. Okay, so that's actually not a terrible synopsis.
Though I will
pretty
say
vague.
Yes, though I will say they turn their family home. It sounds like it's like a Money Pit situation, like the movie The Money Pit.
Oh no, I want to see that blending of a film. Well, Tom Hanks meets Jennifer Jason Leigh in the Louisiana bayou.
And their house is haunted by ghosts. Not like Ghosts, the television show.
No, but I want that. So Money Pit meets Ghosts is actually Ghosts.
The British Ghost, not the American Ghost.
No, we're talking about BBC.
Yeah.
Okay, yes. But then, you get a little bit of murder, you get a little threatening. So we can change it up a bit. We can get it all dark.
Yeah, Southern Gothic.
Yeah, get it all sexy. Yeah. But with Tom Hanks. Once you bring Tom Hanks into it, the sexy goes right out the door. Just
well, I'm sure that works for some people. I'm sure there's somebody that Tom Hanks is like the perfect. Like they see him in Forrest Gump and they're like, there's never been a hotter person.
His wife.
Right. Both of his wives.
Probably more the second than the first.
Yeah, well.
What's her name again?
Rita Wilson.
Yeah, she's lovely.
Yeah, she was really good in Kimmy.
She was fantastic in Kimmy.
Yeah.
She's just fantastic. Mm-hmm. I don't think she's delightful.
Yeah.
I think she's sexy.
Yeah.
But I don't know about Tom Hanks.
Well, to each their own. If you have
it doesn't work for me.
If you have a Tom Hanks thing,
it doesn't work for me.
I mean,
but I'd totally hang out with him and have a beer.
For being kind of the prototypical all-American, the ideal for a lot of people of oh, that's the everyman of America. Is that saying then that the everyman of America is totally sexually neutered? Right?
Why is the everyman always a white guy too?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like a middle-aged white guy.
Well, he wasn't always middle-aged. He was even
Tom Hanks or the everyman? Because I'm aware that Tom Hanks wasn't always middle-aged.
Though he could have been. He could have been just eternal.
Saw him in Splash. He wasn't super old in that or
true.
Big.
He could be like a Dorian Gray situation that he was for a long time. He's I always captured myself in the mirror, and then eventually I aged.
Oh, instead he had a kid.
Yeah,
that's what happened.
Yeah.
I'm talking about Colin Hanks. I think he's nice.
Yeah, Colin Hanks is wonderful. The other one.
It's the other one.
Chet.
Well,
Yeah.
that was the name they picked.
Yeah.
So this is what was going to happen.
He's the Chettiest Chet.
As Colin is the coloniest Colin.
Yeah, he's peak Chet. All right, so
Should we talk about the film?
Yeah,
we're all
like,
here for today.
Yeah, I like it. I really, really enjoyed this film. Like,
Me too.
It kind of hits a sweet spot for me of cinema that I grew up with. Like, I hadn't seen this film until a couple weeks ago. But
I had never heard of it before.
yeah, and I had never heard of it before. Like, Vinegar Syndrome decided to do a restoration of it, and having it now kind of in my life, I'm really, really happy about that.
Austin, before we go into that, what is Vinegar Syndrome? Will you share with people what it is?
Oh, Vinegar Syndrome is a smaller company that re-releases and restores films. They're kind of like Criterion Collection, except they are more genre-based or more like, let's say,
Obscure?
Yeah, obscure. Maybe the right word is exploitation-based. Like the films that they aim to put out touch in different realms in ways that I don't think that Criterion would feel comfortable with or feels that is right for their brand. And what's kind of lovely about Vinegar Syndrome is they don't seem to have any sort of like what's the word? They don't seem to have any sort of belief that there is a type of film that's right. Like you could have Vinegar Syndrome and the companies that it works with put out something like Shiva Baby or put out something like A Woman's Torment. Like, and they are completely different ends of the spectrum of the type of film that you could see in the world. Like one is an art house darling and the other is a exceptionally well-made exploitation or an exceptionally well-made hardcore film.
Yeah, they do like the cult-based films or, as you said, genre-based films. In fact, there's a little breakdown on their website about who they are. Our namesake is a constant reminder of what we're fighting against. Simply put, the Vinegar Syndrome describes a chemical reaction that deteriorates motion picture film over time. Film preservation is a race against time, especially with long neglected genres and underground films. And I think that's a great description. It's almost like they know themselves.
Yeah.
So they did a great job describing themselves.
Yeah, it's better than what I tried to mumble through without looking it up.
Job.
No, I did a fine job.
But they paid somebody to figure out how to define them, and they did a better job.
Yeah, my job was beige. It's like my job of describing them was
With the
like
khaki pants.
Yeah, it was
The khaki pants of pants.
yeah, that was my description of it.
But anyway.
Yeah, anyway, like
So
speaking
you discovered Sister through Vinegar Syndrome.
exactly. And Sister is that. Like in that description, the synopsis that I gave, it is not that description sounds so banal to me rather than like fun and interesting.
Ghost,
like
sexy.
They don't mention that it's
horror.
Southern Gothic. They don't mention that there are ghosts involved. They don't it doesn't mention anything that would actually grab me to want to see it.
Yeah.
Like it
Makes me wonder what the VHS box cover description was of the movie, which is maybe why nobody watched it. Was it that bad?
Yeah, if it even really ever had a release on that.
Yeah.
And the film itself, so the film co-stars Jennifer Jason Leigh and Eric Stoltz. And Eric Stoltz, to me, has always been a really kind of fascinating cinema character because the thing that I remember him most from is being the drug dealer in Pulp Fiction and being the creepy guy in the John Hughes film that he was in.
And for me, he was the tutor in Little Women. From the 90s with Winona Ryder.
And Susan Sarandon and Kirsten Dunst.
I fucking love that movie.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he was the kind of weird, dorky tutor.
Yeah.
And then falls in love with Meg, which I was like, what? Meg can do better than that. But this Eric Stoltz, I'm like, yeah, girl.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I think about Eric Stoltz before seeing this film, I've always thought of him as the drug dealer and then thinking of him as kind of the weakest part of the films that I've seen and always replaceable and not really all that interesting to me. Like I hadn't had a moment where I was like, oh, I get this. I like this. And it like there's the long history of finding out about Eric Stoltz being replaced in Back to the Future after them shooting a whole bunch of the film. And then
Explain that.
like he was he was initially cast as Marty McFly in Back to the Future, and then after shooting maybe a third of the film, maybe more, maybe less, don't know offhand, they were looking at the Robert Zemeckis, the director of the film, was looking at the dailies and was like, "This is not working." So they replaced him, and they fired him and replaced him with whatever his name,
Michael J. Fox.
with Michael J. Fox.
That is so heartbreaking.
It is. Like, I can't, like, we had an experience on our set where one of our actors thought that they had forgotten a piece of like costume, and they showed up on set and they were really distraught, and they thought that they were going to get fired and replaced because their experience has been that they as an actor are infinitely replaceable at a moment's notice if you do anything wrong. And I can't imagine the amount of stress that must put actors under when they show up at set. Not only are they standing in front of the camera, not only getting told that they're doing things right or wrong on a consistent basis as the blueprint of their job, trying to understand the human condition, but also being afraid that when, like, their face might not be the right thing, and that they are infinitely replaceable at a drop of a hat. That shit is scary as hell to me.
We also had an actor who, because they did such a good job performing it, we were able to wrap up the scene within, 3-4 takes. We got it. We're in the can. We're like, okay, great, let's move on. And they confessed to me later that they thought they had been fired in that moment and that we were going to come up with somebody else. And I was like, no, you did a great job.
Yeah.
You were so good. We were good.
Yeah.
And we were done. And it was after that they started to settle. I hope, and felt better. I know it's amazing to me how much the stories we've heard from our actors about how quickly they're replaced, how even in the moment they're filming and then suddenly there's another actor that appears in the background that they're like, yeah, let's swap you with somebody else. And it's just so...
Yeah. So my heart goes out for Eric Stoltz in regards to being replaced in Back to the Future. But watching his performance in this film and
fantastic,
like, and in some ways comparing it to this kind of banal, basic synopsis, like, it isn't until I actually watched the film and seen him do something interesting and really compelling that I now get it. Like, I feel like Eric Stoltz should have been like a villain actor for his, like, he should have been like George Hilton in the Case of the Scorpion's Tail. Like somebody
sexy villain,
like somebody who is super sexy, who's super attractive, who's super interesting, who you there's something about him that you kind of want to root against, but they're charming enough to make you keep, like, going, oh, I actually really like you. I really want you to be part, like, I want to be part of this experience with you. I feel like he might have come along in the wrong era. Like, today with the anti-heroes that are played, I think he would have been like a great, like, Better Call Saul type of actor, or even Breaking Bad, like something like that. Like, even Jesse in Breaking Bad, like, that would have been a really interesting role for him in today's era where people who are attractive can be also villains, and it isn't just like villains are the ones who have foreign accents or are scarred.
Right. I mean, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Producers in the 80s, you guys, get your shit together. Oh, they did, huh? By growing old and us replacing them.
Yeah, being replaced.
But it is interesting. And, it makes you wonder, maybe managers giving bad advice, agents not seeking out those roles, him not realizing that he was actually shining in moments like that, because this film didn't do well. Yeah. This film wasn't discovered. So I read a bunch of different reviews at the time this movie was released, including one in the Los Angeles Times. And it just shits on the movie. It says that the director takes it too seriously. It says that the actors are talented but lifeless. So I'm not really sure what the hell that means.
Right.
The reviews are dismissive, minimizing,
full of doublespeak.
Yes, and also very patriarchal all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just find it so dismissive, and I suppose that's because I think that it is a genre piece. It's kind of underground. I can see why Vinegar Syndrome released it because of the mixture of the Southern Gothic, the horror elements, the thriller elements, the ghosts, the supernatural, it's just, there's a lot going on, and it doesn't really dig into any of them super fully. It sort of just kind of plays with each one. It's sort of like, ooh, we're going to try all these on. And I think that's fun.
Yeah.
And obviously these reviewers are like, no, it must be a canon piece or nothing. Why are you wasting my time?
Right. And to touch base on the on something I think I alluded to mostly earlier was like this is the type of film from my childhood that I watched a lot. Like it's like the second bill on in a triple feature. Like it's super entertaining. There's really quality work. There's a lot of thought that goes into it, but like it might not be like it's not Citizen Kane, but nor is it trying to be. It's just trying to be an entertaining piece of work. Like it's an hour and a half to help you pass the time and give you some thoughts and experiment in a different world. Like it touches base on all those things, the Southern Gothic, which is really fascinating. Like there's a whole bunch of films that I love that are Southern Gothic that range from like The Gingerbread Man which is a Robert Altman film, to Eve's Bayou. Like there's so much fertile ground to talk about in different experiences for different people within the area that it is, or that it takes place. Or even like that wonderful film we saw at Mahoning last year, Eaten Alive, the crocodile
Yes.
film.
That was so fun.
And while I think that's a Texas film, it's still that area of the South,
like
around
swampy.
Around the Gulf, the Gulf of Mexico, that's just a fascinating rural position in America that doesn't maybe get as much highlight as it could.
Well, there's a very interesting discussion of nature versus, typically we're talking about Caucasians is what in cinema and in literature. So when you have European literature, you have more fear of, especially English literature, you have more fear of the kings, of the powers that be, of the authority figures. And you get into America and you have a lot more of the fear of the wilds.
Yeah.
And so I always enjoy a good film where we take nature and everyone in town seems to be sort of afraid of the swampland, afraid of the house where the women live, afraid of that space around them, except for Etienne.
Yeah.
And the girls.
Yeah.
Well, not even both. I'd say Jennifer Jason Leigh's character seems very at peace with the swamp.
And to clarify quickly, like there are three people who seem to work consistently on at the bed and breakfast. There's Etienne, there's
Judith Ivy's character,
Charlotte, and then there's Jennifer Jason Leigh, Lucy. Like all three of them basically run. It's Lucy and Charlotte's bed and breakfast, but Etienne is kind of the handyman who lives on the swamp and has a huge fucking hard on for Lucy.
Yes, he has a crush on her.
And Lucy, like this is something that I think is one of my favorite scenes in the film. Is the first thing it starts off with, which is something that I think is an underscore of the entirety of the film, which is Lucy's exploration of her own sexual debut. The film starts off with a fantasy of her having sex with an unknown
Faceless
man.
person. We never see his face.
It's just a man who's having sex with her, and then she looks up to the ceiling, and there's a crack, and then water starts to fall, and then water dumps on her bed, and she wakes up.
She's drowning.
Yeah.
Her fantasy is pushing her under the water.
Yep.
And she's fighting now. So she's not happy anymore. Yeah. She seems very unhappy.
But there's something really incredible about that fantasy that she's having. Both that it's a fantasy, like, and that we should view it as such. Like, it's not something that she actually wants to have happen. She doesn't want, because...
It's not a fetish.
Right. It's something that she is exploring in her own subconscious about the things that she wants. And it's her desire. And that is then played out through the rest of the film. Her desire for Eric Stoltz's character, her desire to become somebody different than who she is, than the person who has to take her pill before she goes to bed, somebody who had a mental breakdown earlier in life, somebody who has to be sheltered and coddled and shuttered in a lot of ways. She is trying to find her way to her own identity throughout the entirety of the film, making good and bad choices along the way.
As we do.
But that's her, the film starts off with her fantasy being shown out to push back about a bunch of the criticism that you've told me about from reading on the of the film. Like, that's what the film's about. It's her pushing back. It's her
boundaries, her pushing her boundaries.
And I know that by watching the films that we've watched in our kind of history with cinema, like there isn't a lot of space for women's fantasies, especially sexual fantasies, to be just expressed and not judged in cinema, in Western and American cinema specifically. Like, it's not something that we're like, yeah, that woman fantasized about this and then wasn't punished for it.
Right. That doesn't happen. No, it is always the male fantasy. And we are talking about heteronormative films right now. We're not talking about queer cinema. But in typical heteronormative cinema, you can have the male fantasy. You can have the woman have to enact the male fantasy. But the idea of the woman having her own fantasy is not part of mainstream cinema. And I honestly believe that in part, that is why this did not do well.
Yeah.
Probably also because on the premiere screening, it turns out that the audio sync went out.
Oh, God.
And so it's real hard to get good reviews if your sync isn't lined up.
Right. and thinking...
So heartbreaking.
So fucking heartbreaking. Another fucking heartbreaking thing. Like, and thinking about... a film we talked about a few weeks ago, Desert Hearts. It's comparing that film's fantasy and that film's like desirous intent. Like, those two women, while they go through some shit together, at the end she gets on the train with him.
Train.
So like the fantasy isn't punished in that film. Like, the fantasy and the hope of what you could do with your life and the life that you could have is open. Kind of like that film is very much like the vision we have of a Western. Like, there's a wide open plain out there and you can make your own life in it. Whereas this film, like, we meet her fantasy at the beginning, and at the end of the film, her fantasy comes back in the case of Eric Stoltz as a ghost now, breaking through a window or breaking through a mirror and jumping at her, showing her in a way that the trauma that she had that led to part of her fantasy in the beginning of the film and the trauma she has now at the end of the film are tied. They're just different versions of that sort of trauma.
I mean, you can also say that her fantasy / dream sequence / nightmare at the beginning is the foreshadowing of what happens, because she does end up with Eric Stoltz, really likes him, and then he tries to drown her.
Yeah.
So that whole scene is repeated.
Yes.
As he's pushing her underwater, and then joke's on you because she's got ghosts on her side.
Yeah.
Deal with that, bitch.
Yeah. Don't fight a person who has ghosts on their side.
If they have ghosts on your side,
yeah,
you got to step back because you aren't going to win that fight.
Yeah.
Unless you're in BBC Ghosts and they can't touch anything. Oh, except for the
computer.
No, the computer. No, what's his name? Oh, I'm forgetting him from Dictatorists. Whatever, the politician.
Yeah.
Yes, I nailed my story by forgetting everything.
High five.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
so
back to this.
Yeah, but, and it's funny you bring that up because I really hadn't put that together, the connection of she in a way has second sight because she sees what's going to happen to her, and then it happens to her later, and the film is subtle enough to not beat you over the head with that. It's subtle enough to tell you that she sees ghosts in a really wonderful story that she tells the guests of the
who I loved.
Yes, they're wonderful. But she tells everybody this. Like, there's, in contrast to some of the negative reviews that highlighted the idea that they were beating you over the head, there's a lot of subtlety to what's going on. There's a lot of wonderful little shifts that are like, no, we're just going to put this out here and then the thing will happen. We talked about this after we watched it the first time. It feels like this film was like 30 minutes longer and then got hacked up and shortened because there's so much to it that feels not missing, but truncated. Like
there's echoes of something that we don't get to see.
Yeah. And I don't think that would make it a better or worse film to have longer. It would make it a different film. And I really enjoy the one that I have seen. So I don't want to belabor that point.
I did look it up to try to find out if that is true. I couldn't find anything, but there's barely anything written about it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm interested in listening to the commentary track by the director on the DVD, but other than on the Blu-ray, but other than that, I don't know if it has been shortened.
Yeah.
And he's the writer too. So
and Bill Condon went on to make Dreamgirls and a film that I think is really now underrated because I never hear anybody talk about it. Gods and Monsters with Ian McKellen and Brendan Fraser, which is really, really good.
And the last two in the series of Twilight.
Yes.
Which is probably his greatest works ever.
Well, we can't live in a world like there was,
Twilight.
No, frankly, honestly, there was pre-Renesmee as an evil baby child. And now there's post-Renesmee where we all know what that evil baby child is.
Why do I have to know in my brain? Burned into my brain.
Yep.
To be clear.
Yeah.
We will not be discussing Twilight on this podcast beyond this moment.
Yeah, but we will be living in a post-Twilight world.
We are all stuck in a post-Twilight world.
Yeah.
Having said that, I do love Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson.
Yeah, and Lee Pace showing up in the last one. And
Was he? I don't even remember him in it.
He's in it as well.
And Michael Sheen.
Michael Sheen and Dakota Fanning. There's a lot of
good actors.
There's a lot of really talented people involved in that film. And
Line.
And there's a lot of acting happening.
Is there?
Yeah, it's not like it's the kind of acting that I would say is not good acting, but it's acting. Like there people,
is a performance happening.
Yeah, there are people performing. It's like,
well, the source material is so bad.
Right. It would be equivalent to me performing Twilight in a lot of ways.
Oh, I don't know. I think you could do a pretty good job.
No, I don't think I could.
No?
I'm not searking for a compliment here.
I'm providing you with one.
I think I could do a mediocre to poor job. I think that people would be like, you know what? Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart really did give it their all after seeing my performance.
I mean, Oscars everywhere.
Yeah.
You get an Oscar and you get an Oscar. Oh, God. It's so bad. But again, the source material is terrible.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Back to the movie, Sister.
Back to Sister.
Which is, I really like this movie.
Why do you really like it?
I like the fact that we dabble in so many different things. So we've been watching a lot of giallo films, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things about giallo films, for anyone who doesn't know, is that many times they're used sort of as early travel vlogs, right? They're fake, just like travel vlogs are fake.
Yeah.
They're filled with beautiful people, just like travel vlogs are filled with beautiful people. Posing in beautiful outfits that are probably provided by somebody.
Yep.
And they're fun because they take you to some place you typically don't get to go, in theory. The English countryside or France or Italy or
Greece,
Spain.
Australia for one.
Yeah. So giallo films go all over the place, and I believe they work with many of the countries to help get funding and stuff. So this kind of feels like that to me. You get to go travel and experience this one little piece of the swamp. Mm-hmm. And it feels like the swamp. The cinematography has there's a lot of smokiness going on. There's a lot of trees. There's mysticism. And so I find this film a lot of fun because I enjoy being in this place. It feels very hot and sweaty. The rain. There's just a lot of sensory elements to it.
Yeah.
And you can kind of fall into this movie really easily without having to put too much thought into it. Mm-hmm. And it's a good kind of travel space, and then you get your ghosts. And if you're going to bring ghosts or spookiness or paranormal activity, I am fucking in. I love it.
Yeah. It hits kind of, it's low end eroticism. It has ghosts. There's
boobs and ghosts. What else do you need?
Yeah. No ghost boobs though.
No. Well, not yet.
Well,
I'm sure there'll be a sequel.
Yeah.
Ghost boobs.
Yeah, ghost boobs.
The sequel.
Yeah. Just been haunted by that boob.
I'll write it.
Yeah.
And one of the other things I really enjoy about this film actually is a bit surprising, which is the kind of the discussion of mental health. So it's pretty early days for people to be discussing mental health. And the 80s wasn't really a boom time for people to get treatment. But you have a character, and I feel like this is where the reviews actually piss me off, because the character of Lucy is found to be unstable. We know that she has been in treatment. We know she takes her medicine. Mm-hmm. And we know that she is fighting her sister to continue to take the medicine. And her sister gets really mad. Judith Ivey gets really mad. Her character gets mad when, I can't remember, I think it's her boyfriend, ex-boyfriend says, you're just protecting her. You're not letting her get better. I can't quite remember the scene, but I feel like it's Cleve.
Yeah.
Who I love that actor from Eyes on Fire.
Yeah.
He's so great. Cleve. I mean, just if you're going to name your kid Cleve, it's like naming your kid Chet. Like, what was your plan?
Yeah, Cleve.
It's not a good strategy.
Just as a quick aside, do you think Cleve is short for something?
Well, everybody wants to move to the Cleve, Lemon.
Yeah, that's why they call it the Cleve.
I don't know. Cleveland?
No, maybe. It's got to be Cleveland. He's got to be named Cleveland.
Cleveland, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
But then maybe it's Cleve. Like, we met a Cletus. I didn't think that was a name for a while.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Working
remember,
at Ruby Tuesdays.
I remember meeting Cletus.
That was dark times.
That was not a great idea.
We're so glad we have a master's degree and now we're working at Ruby Tuesdays.
It's a great way to build up your self-esteem after getting
dropping off all the worst customers to us.
Yeah. Going from Dublin, Ireland to Rehoboth, Delaware, and working at Ruby Tuesdays.
In the winter.
Yeah, not...
And for anybody who knows Rehoboth, Delaware now, no. There's stuff to do now in the winter. There wasn't then.
Yes.
Anyway, skip to the end. Back to the point. So one of the things I really liked about the film was the conversation about mental health, even though it was just sort of a perimeter story. And what I liked about it was the showing of Lucy kind of starting to rebel. I feel better, so I don't need to take this medication. Mm-hmm. And Charlotte being like, yes, you feel better because you are taking the medication and because I'm working my fucking ass off to protect you and to make sure you're going to keep getting better.
Yeah.
Because you don't remember how bad you were. Uh-huh. And I do. And I know what we've been through. And I liked that because that was very realistic.
Yeah.
In my experience with many different people with mental health issues, there's always a point where as they get better, they think, okay, cool, I don't need to do this anymore. And you're like, no, the reason you're better is because you're doing this. Please don't stop doing this. And it's a fight every time. And so I really appreciated that about the film.
Yeah, I agree. Like the amount of friends that I've had and that I have that I've seen struggle with their mental health and go through periods of time where they're like, no, I'm good. Like, I don't need it anymore. And then immediately followed by issues arising from not taking care of their mental health felt very much seen in this film of like, and something that the film does really interesting is play with Charlotte's culpability and Charlotte's like our belief in her, because one thing that giallo films do well and films that touch base on this do well is they try to make doctors out to be villains at times, and or people who are trying to take care of your health. They make them the villains so that you're actually what films tend to do in this case is be like, actually, if you were off it, you'd see the world clearly, and when you see the world clearly, you can see all of how the webs intertwine.
Right.
And so the film starts to lean towards Charlotte being maybe not the best person for Lucy to be around right around the time that Matt, Eric Stoltz's character, starts to insinuate into Lucy's life how much she's right. Mm-hmm. Like, he turns into this wonderful devil character of like, no, you're fine. Like, these are the things that you should do. You should be romantically involved with me. You should be your own free person. You should be like, he's just leaning on her to move her the direction that he wants her to go. Mm-hmm. Somebody who is susceptible to change because with her mental health issues, she wants to be seen as a full person rather than us viewing her as a full person regardless of her mental health issues.
And also because she's a child.
Yes.
Like she's, we're guessing 19, maybe 20, if that. And so you also have that element of the transformation from childhood to adulthood, the fact that she's very, very isolated. So she's still playing very childish games with Etienne, though clearly he's like, can we please move forward with this? Yeah. And just that it wasn't an opportunity for them to do that, though I think that they would have eventually.
Yeah.
And then I think as well and I don't think that was Charlotte's. She was interrupting them from from that evolution happening. But I don't necessarily think that's the reason why. I don't think that maybe Lucy was ready yet for that transformation with Etienne. It had to be somebody from the outside.
Yeah, and I want to let's talk about the reason why Charlotte is acting the way she is.
Yeah, the secret.
The reason that Charlotte is acting the way that she is because on her birthday, when she was, I think, 16.
Yeah, it was probably your sweet 16.
Her boyfriend attempts to rape her. Mm-hmm. And Lucy sees this, hits him on the head with a rock.
She interrupts it.
And then her boyfriend starts to rape Lucy, who seems to be 12, 10, something fucking
little.
He tries to rape a child. And so Lucy and Charlotte kill Charlotte's boyfriend.
Yeah.
To which...
As self-defense.
In self-defense. Completely self-defense. Completely justifiable homicide. Then they hide the body.
Right. Because they're children.
Yeah, because they're children. And because we still know today that if a woman was to come forward with that, there's a better chance that she's going to be convicted in the courts of just straight up murder rather than protecting themselves from a fucking rapist. It's a very believable situation. They hide his body in the swamp, and then they leave his hat. They misplace his hat.
Correct.
And we later find out that the hat was found not by Etienne, which is what Lucy thinks, but in fact by Matt, Eric Stoltz's character, as a child, and he has come back to punish them.
Well, he's come back for revenge for his brother's death.
Right.
Because the rapist boyfriend was Eric Stoltz's older brother.
Right.
Correct. And just on a side note, I just listened to a true crime podcast about, and it's very sad, guys, so I'm just telling you, about a little 11-year-old girl who was babysitting and got raped and murdered while babysitting 2 little kids. And when the attorney general was discussing it, it might have been the lawyer. I could be remembering that wrong. But either the attorney general or the lawyer, one of the lawyers discussing the case, implied that she, might have been having sex with somebody else because she was hot. She was 11. So your point of children not being believed and women not being believed for the assault against them is a really important point, which goes back to the LA Times review that dismisses this as if the director took his material too seriously. Pisses me off.
Yeah.
Because again, it is accurate. It is accurate. This is what happens.
Yeah. And the idea of taking rape too seriously is it's
go fuck yourself.
Yeah. It's not up for discussion.
No.
It's just there's nothing. Yeah.
No, there's no asking for it. There's no what you wore. There's no you were in the wrong place. There's no none of that.
There's taking it too lightly. Mm-hmm. And that's about it.
That's it.
Yeah. It's fucking death as seriousness. It's nothing else. So the fact that so this is the cause of what all of Charlotte's actions are. In her formative moment at 16 with her boyfriend, he tries to rape her. And for the repercussions that we see, she is trying to stop any sort of sexual activity between her sister and anyone as a repercussion for the act that was done to her. Mm-hmm. Because what happened is you are raped and you have to murder somebody. You are attacked and you have to murder somebody.
Sure, she was very formative years for her.
It's
not handled. She's not doing mental health treatment. It's
presented as one-to-one because later, literally later in the film, she, when Lucy is having sex with Matt, mm-hmm. when Lucy and Matt are having sex, Charlotte's upstairs going through the drawers and putting on the dress she was wearing when she was assaulted. And the film is making an incredible tie between her sexual assault, her sister's sexual debut, mm-hmm. and this man.
Yeah.
It could not be clearer what the film is trying to say, which is there is so much trauma surrounding sex.
Yeah.
That we do not discuss or get into. We have fantasies about it that we don't understand and that you can't explain. Mm-hmm. That if you talk in pleasant company, whatever the fuck that means, in just mm-hmm. public, people are going to be like, well, that's a fucking weirdo talking about that. Mm-hmm. This film ties all those little buttons together and goes, no, they're all one thing. Like having a discussion about sex, the person that you have sex with, what that means to you, how that means, how that applies is an incredibly complicated and convoluted thing that we do not have the words or generally time and patience and sympathy to discuss. And the film does an excellent job of tying all those things together in that moment and then showing, because this is the theme of the film, that it's all bad. Like that you can like in the end of the film there's a wedding, so it's almost like a Shakespeare, like it ends with a comedy. But it's still like, no, all these things are really tied together in a horrific, like hard manner.
Yeah. There is a lot of trauma. This is a movie about trauma, which is interesting.
Yeah.
It's always interesting and not to be dismissed.
Yeah. And it never shies away from the fact that it's about trauma.
And I think that's something that's interesting about cult movies, underground film, indie film. We have an opportunity to play with difficult subject matter, to play with it through different lenses like ghosts and psychological trauma and fog in the bayou.
Use archetypes to tell very specific ideas out and then allow the cultural understanding to change and morph with the film and then have the film or piece of art mean something different.
Right. Whereas mainstream, a more kind of corporate cinema, it doesn't allow for that.
Yeah.
It doesn't allow for that nuance or not even nuance. Sometimes just messiness. Like everything has to be so perfectly tied up and so clear and so direct. And there's a messiness to underground cinema.
Well, it ties to something that we were talking about a while ago, or earlier today, in fact. Those sorts of films, those sorts of corporate films, are uninterested in any sort of convolution, any sort of conflict, any sort of thing that isn't a binary answer. Like this is
good
right
or bad.
Right. Like any sort of thing that can make a conflict muddied. You're like, no, we can't do that because we can have morally conflicted characters, but they'll make the right decision.
And we all know exactly what the right decision is. We've anticipated what that right decision is, so that when they get there, we're like, yeah, we all made this right decision together.
It is such a boring Christian way of telling a film. Be like, well, the moral is going to be this, or the television show, the moral is going to be this. They're either going to be punished for their bad actions, or they're going to return to the fold. Like
it's comforting.
Yeah,
that's what it is. It's a comforting type of cinema because it's predictable. And it's there to kind of be the opiate of the masses, to calm everybody down.
Yeah.
You're in a crisis. You're in a pandemic. You're in a war.
Yeah.
Like, let's not worry about questioning anything. But art is supposed to make you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's supposed to make you question things. And not all of it.
Yeah.
Some of it can be comfy.
Yeah. I was watching this film, Bilitis, the other night. And it's a really interesting film, and the beginning of it's about the sexual awakening for this female character and her own discovery of her own sexual identity. And the beginning of it is she's at a all-girls school, and one of her friends at night in bed crawls in with her and starts to make sexual advances, and she's not quite sure how she feels about it, but she goes along with it, and the friend is like, just pretend I'm this person, and they have this sexual moment. And when you're watching the performance by the lead actor, you see her go through all these different kind of confusing, conflicted emotions. It doesn't mean, and to me, it doesn't read as her being raped or sexually assaulted. She just doesn't understand it. And so she's going through the emotions. And because we don't have that sort of moral ambiguity in a lot of films, or the films don't have the strength of character to be like, let's be morally ambiguous.
Yeah, let's see what happens.
Let's see what an audience says to what they see here. Seeing a human being struggle through a decision is a hard thing to do because we want them to be quick and easy. And most decisions that we have to make that actually change our lives are very difficult. And it takes a long time for us to actually come to terms with what that decision meant.
Well, sure, because what's interesting about that discussion is we're starting to develop a language that's different. I think that's a great example of the conversation right now about non-binary and pronouns. It didn't, when we were in our 20s, this didn't exist. I mean, it did. It just, nobody would talk about it. This language didn't exist yet. And so you didn't have an opportunity to ask the questions. And so it's really exciting that this is all happening now. So it's exciting when film does something like that, even if in the end, it isn't a positive experience for the character. Again, these are actors who are performing. This is not real life, people. And so we're asking questions and we're putting the audience into an uncomfortable position to hopefully talk with their people and talk to their therapist and talk and try to figure out what it means to them.
And it's really important for art to continue to be that thing and not just be the corporate speak of like, here's a simple answer, because
we don't need more propaganda in our art.
Yes, we have enough of that in our television, in our ads, in everything that somebody says to try to convince you of something or other. Like being conflicted is a genuinely powerful place to be, because it means that you don't know, and it means that you have a power over somebody who does. Somebody who does, like, it's. I think it's almost misbegotten the way that we present unsure versus sure, because somebody who's sure, like, they're definitive, they're just going to do that, like, great. But somebody who is not sure, I don't know, like, that's a fucking roll of the dice. Like, who knows what that person's going to fucking do? I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know how they're going to act. And sometimes, like, that can be explosive and negative and has its own complications and issues with it. But sometimes being somebody who just doesn't know how they're going to respond to something, but has a good understanding of their own character and own belief structure and what they want to achieve, that makes you a more interesting person. And that's kind of the type of film or person that I'm interested in watching.
Yeah, well said.
So there's another scene that I love in the film is the scene in which Cleve talks to Charlotte. The first time we meet Cleve and Charlotte have been in a long-term relationship, and they meet at a dance because it's a social event
That's what they do.
Like, imagine going to dances, like, as an adult.
Sounds fun.
Like just be like, hey, there's going to be a band and we're going to dance. Like, that sounds like, after being in pandemic for 2 years, fuck yeah. Like weird ass dances where everybody knows the moves and nobody's there for anything other than just having a good time. That sounds fucking extraordinary.
Sound wonderful.
But they go to they meet at the dance, and Cleve has this wonderful little monologue talking to Charlotte. And it's something that I love in cinema, that I absolutely adore in cinema, in writing in cinema. When somebody tells a story in a situation that has a lot of people around, so that somebody else can't make a histrionic response. And I'm not saying histrionic because it's Charlotte and it's a female. It's just anybody blowing up at the other person for telling them something that they don't want to hear or they're not prepared to hear. I love how the speech goes, where he tells her that he knows a guy that he helped solve a problem for. And the problem was that the girl just didn't like him that much. And there's something so remarkably beautiful about the actor who plays Cleve.
I love him.
Dennis Lipscomb, I think his name is, who, as you said earlier, was in a wonderful film called Eyes of Fire.
Eyes on Fire.
And he is so lovely in this. He feels beaten down, sad, and yet I don't feel depressed for him. I don't feel like he's gonna just like drink himself to death.
No.
There's just something really like,
well, that moment right after he tells her that they're breaking up, because he's just so heartbroken by the fact that he has to come to terms with the fact that she doesn't really love him enough. And he believes he deserves better than that.
Yeah.
It's so wonderful and heartbreaking.
It's bittersweet.
It is bittersweet. And then having him immediately be pulled away and say, you're the sheriff, you got to dance. You do that certain dance that everybody loves. Do the dance. And you know that, oh yeah, he brought her here because he feels like this is his community and he has support. And, you know, he feels like he feels like shit after you have to break up with someone because you think they don't love you enough.
Yeah.
And so you need the support of being like, see, all these people like me, and I'm going to do this little dance and show you that I'm okay, which hopefully makes you think that I'm amazing and you actually do want to be with me and you do want to marry me, which proves to be true. But yeah, that scene where he dances and then he dances.
Yeah.
And it's just so, oof.
There's so much going on in that scene for the actor and the text of the film and the subtext of the film. There's just so much lovely work happening. Like,
And how much of an outsider she is.
Yeah. Because she leaves.
Yeah, you
she
see
leaves.
that she's like disappears into the crowd.
Yeah. Like it tells you so much about the world that they live in. And it's frankly a scene like that I'm like, how the fuck can somebody watch this film and think that it's like beating you over the head with what's happening? Because that text, if you got the text, if you watched it and read it, then the film did exactly what it said it was going to do. It was going to teach you something about these characters and you learn something right there. And then you can apply that knowledge, why they're isolated, why he still likes her, because of how he speaks to her. You can tell that he's so heartbroken about the fact that he knows that it's not going to work right now, even if he tried his whole life to make it work, and that he is kind of willing to do that. Mm-hmm. Like, there's so much fucking text there. I adore that scene.
Me too. It's a wonderful scene.
Yeah,
it's really important because it does show her outsiderness, but it also shows that he is, well, it makes him coming back realistic.
Yeah.
Like, it shows how much he loves her, but also how strong he is for himself.
Yeah. And
his own self-worth.
And it also does something very important, which is how he plays it, how they all choose to play it. He doesn't come across mean. He doesn't come across as another option of who could be the villain of the film. Because there are moments of the film that it feels like it touches into the slasher element as what is revealed to be Matt later is killing some people around or killing the dog. Like, we don't
the dog.
Yeah, we never see Cleve as a possible suspect.
No, we don't.
And you could, in a different film, you could make him a suspect and be like, let's throw a little light this way and check it out. But in this film, they're like, no. Cleve's never.
No, he's a big hug.
Yeah, he is a big hug. Like, he's just a guy that you're like, okay. Like, if I need safety and not too much excitement, it's Cleve.
And and knowing his work from Eyes on Fire, that is a really good portrayal that he is doing.
Yes.
That is not necessarily written in the script, because his work on Eyes on Fire, he's a scumbag.
Yeah, he's a shit
horrible.
murderer.
He's just gross, and you hate him, and you just want to be away from him, and he's toxic as fuck. Toxic masculinity ruins the party again, and he is the one who does. Yeah. So the fact that he is so the opposite of that in this really shows his strength and the spectrum of his work.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that's also really strong throughout the film. Like, all the supporting characters, from Etienne to
I love the lady with her kids, her
Miss
daughter
Beetleham.
Oh, she's so good.
Like all these characters, all these supporting characters fill out the side of the film in such a wonderful way that you know that it's one of the three leads that the bad thing is. And it really comes down to believing whether it's Charlotte or Matt. And at the end of the day, it's really clear that it's got to be Matt.
Yeah.
But...
Because, like, why now would she be killing her sister?
Right.
When there's a bunch of people there.
And it's one of those things where, like, the great writer, was it Ernesto Gestaldi, who wrote a whole bunch of the Giallo films that I love, talked about that at the end, a good mystery has to make sense, regardless of how wild it is. Because if it doesn't make logical sense, then you're just going to lose the thread. You're going to be like, oh, well, that's stupid. Like, cool that all these things magically happen, but fuck you. Like, that couldn't possibly be. So the fact that Matt has done this, and the fact that Matt is the one doing it, is the only way that it makes logical sense. But there's enough information in the film to make you feel that Charlotte could be doing some shady shit to her sister.
Or Etienne.
Yeah, or Etienne.
He's definitely he's sus.
Yeah, until he gets arrowed to death.
Right, which is such a bummer way to die.
Yeah, yes, it sucks. Arrowed, and at least he doesn't get eaten by the alligator that we earlier see, which is like the opposite of Chekhov's gun.
You could have been eaten by an alligator.
Yes.
That time we were in the Everglades.
Yeah, but I wasn't, luckily. Or if I was and I'm a ghost now, like I'm a very productive ghost.
Ghost podcaster.
Yeah. So, yeah, I really, like, there's so much of this film that I love. Etienne, the guy who plays Etienne is fantastic.
Yeah.
Like, though I think that his Creole accent sometimes goes in and out.
Questionable.
But I don't, like,
His French wasn't terrible.
yeah, the thing is, I don't really care. Like, maybe that makes me a bad movie watcher because I don't really give a shit about.
It means you have a good suspension of disbelief.
Yeah, it's the same sort of, it would be the same sort of suspension of disbelief that when I'm watching a Giallo film and I'm like, oh, you know, this actor is obviously speaking English. That one's obviously not speaking English. And I have no idea what language that other person is speaking.
To explain what Austin is saying right now.
Yeah.
When you watch a Giallo film,
Or a lot of Italian films of the 1960s and 70s.
they weren't recording audio on set, and they often had many different actors from different nationalities playing the parts. So they would have the actor perform in their native language
Yeah.
and just dub it.
Yeah.
Because everything was going to be dubbed, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
Which is it's really interesting because it is fascinating how quickly, once you understand that and you're not mad about it, if you just release that pressure to be like, why isn't it lining up? You don't speak Italian anyway, so like, what's the problem? It's
Yeah.
going to be subtitled.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or maybe you do. I'm not judging you if you do speak Italian and you're like, why is it dubbed weirdly? But the point is just let your brain go, stop judging and critiquing, and just enjoy the piece. And then once you kind of learn that rhythm and how to do that, then a lot of other films get opened up to you.
Yeah. If you're spending your time watching shitty reality shows, you're already suggesting that you're not into perfection. So why are you limiting
Interesting.
your perfection to just the English language? Are you that much of a xenophobe?
No. That's a really interesting question, though. Like with the onset of YouTube, with the reality TV show phenomenon, like all these booms of mediocre to subpar video contents, are we in a position now to kind of bring back in these cult films, this underground film movement that people don't know about, to watch and be in a better place to absorb it when previous to this, the only stuff you had was either primetime TV or corporate movies.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It'd be interesting to try to show people.
Well,
So that's what we're doing with these movies. Anyway, we're picking stuff that hopefully you haven't seen before, or if you have that you don't remember that you've watched and you'd like to watch again. I don't know. I just really like this movie.
yeah, so do I.
I think it's cool.
I think it's a gem of a film. Like, it's not perfect.
No.
But there's so much good in it. Jennifer Jason Leigh is phenomenal in it.
She's really good.
Like, it's like Eric Stoltz is really good.
They're on fire.
Yeah, they're
Like the sexual chemistry between them is like, whoo.
and knowing that they were dating at the time makes sense, but it also is wonderful that they were able to capture this. Like, it's like it's nice to see this fiery intensity between these two performers, and not know that it's coming from a place of actual desire, because who gives a shit?
No,
but like the fact that that the film captured this desire between these two people, and we see it, is wonderful. There's enough films where you're like, yeah, I don't really think that those two people like each other.
No,
very
yeah,
much.
I know, it's so
they
weird.
probably hate kissing each other.
Right?
Like I think these two people loved kissing each other.
It was fun.
I think they love fucking making out.
It was, and then, then there's so much 80s hair. So, what's not to like?
Yeah, and to get back, khaki pants.
And khaki pants.
Yeah.
With pleats.
Yeah.
You're welcome. So I think there's one thing that we did discuss that we just want to pose as a question
Yeah.
to everyone to sort of think about. Like, if you watch this movie again, or as you're reflecting on the film, the thing that we both noticed was the absence. And that is the absence of anyone of color. This is Louisiana in the bayou. And it is apparently an entirely white space.
Yeah.
And we just ask the question for you. What would this film be? What would it look like if we actually had some diversity here? How would it adjust the story? How would it change things?
Yeah.
Would it? What is going on here? There's a critique we once heard. I think it's Godard said it. The best critique is to make another film.
Yeah.
So of course that would mean make another film. And hey, if you guys want to,
Make another film.
make Sister Part 2.
Yeah.
And change it up, go for it. Yeah, Austin, what would you say to that?
I think there's an interesting thought experiment, and I would love to see it played out, of what would it look like with casting anybody of color in any of the roles, in the two sister roles, but keep everybody else white. Cast Etienne and the sheriff as a person of color. Like, what does it bring up? What stories and narratives do we get to tell? Do we get to, maybe not do we get to tell, but do we get to experience, because we are adding what actually is the American story to this American film?
Right.
Because right now, the film, like, as we said, I like the film a lot, but it feels like a floor model film. Like, these are all, this is what you should be looking for, or that is the correct or
beautiful, hot, white, young.
Yeah. What does it do to the film and the narrative if we start looking at it and saying that there is a racial experience in America? It just becomes a different film if we start looking at casting people of color in this. And it becomes, I think, a more interesting film because it becomes
more complex.
Yeah, a more complex film,
Yeah.
and one that we can't just dismiss out of hand because it's kind of like other films.
Right. And I think that this is part of the conversation in cinema, is that in most of the history of Western cinema, there is an erasure of all race. There is white people, end of story.
Yeah.
And that is something that everyone, hopefully within cinema today, is working to change. Everyone is mindful of. At least that's what we're hoping for. And that's what we're working on with our stories. And so it is an interesting thought experiment when you watch older cinema to ask yourself, is there an erasure of something? What is missing? Queerness is missing.
Yeah.
Diversity is missing. It doesn't feel authentic to actually where this is taking place because we have no representation of X, Y, or Z. And it's just something that we suggest that as you kind of build up your viewing history of cinema, sometimes to pay attention to, and reflect on.
Yeah, and start to demand in the stories that you watch and see, like, these things that just kind of you find interesting about what it is to experience life as a human being. The film deals with her sexual awakening, with Lucy's sexual awakening, which to a lot of people still is a taboo conversation. And if we're having one taboo conversation, why stop there? Like, and it's not to say that a woman's sexual debut and her own sexual identity and discovery is, or their own sexual debut and discovery is not enough. But in a film where that isn't the only subject on its mind, why not tell other subjects? Why not continue to force a conversation into the public domain that needs to be had, which is what does it mean to be an American right now?
Yeah. I like those questions. So there you go. Chew on that. See what you think. And feel free to jump into our Instagram and DM us some thoughts you have.
Yeah.
And share with us what you think. So I think it's time.
What time is it?
It's time to find out what you want to recommend to stumble upon next.
I mentioned it in the podcast earlier, but I think that Sergio Martino's film, The Case of the Scorpion Tail, is an incredible film to kind of stumble upon. I described it a little bit earlier, but it's a film about a woman whose husband dies in a plane crash. She has to travel to Greece to get the inheritance. A private eye follows her there, and the private eye is kind of the villain of the film. And it's a really interesting film because it does ask the question, how many chances are we going to give this white guy to be innocent, even though he's obviously guilty? And it also does some interesting narrative things where it's like, you know what? These characters that you think are important, we're just going to kill off. Like, they don't need to be here anymore. They've served their purpose. And it just is a free-flowing kind of narrative in a way that not a lot of cinema is. Emily, do you have something that you would like to share?
I do. I have something that I would like to recommend to stumble upon next, and that is Eve's Bayou, which is directed by Cassie Lemons, and that was her debut as a director. So this was Bill Condon's directorial debut, and Eve's Bayou is Cassie Lemons' directorial debut. So that's a debut you can watch. It's also taking place in the South. It's also hot and sweaty, and it's a fantastic film. It is so good. It is so good. So yeah, I want to recommend that.
Okay.
To stumble upon next. So thank you all for joining us today. We really enjoyed talking about Sister Sister with you.
Yeah, and we apologize for the lateness of this podcast. We're in the middle of sound mixing our film, so we're almost done with it now. So
We're getting so close, everybody.
So we might be having a little bit of an odd schedule as we continue forward because we're just finishing off like a feature film.
Yeah, feature. It's a lot of work. Turns out.
Yeah,
It
turns out it's not a small undertaking.
So much work, and then you work too.
Yeah. Anyway.
So thank you.
But you can get all the updates about the film as well on our Instagram and our Twitter. Follow along. Please reach out. Like we're very sociable.
We are at Fishtown Films on Instagram and Twitter.
Yes.
We respond better to Instagram than Twitter.
Yes.
Simply because I can never remember the password to Twitter.
That's fine.
If you reach out to us on LinkedIn, I may notice it in 6 to 10 years.
Yes.
So please do.
Yeah. Also, if you find us on Facebook, we are very rarely there.
I think I was on sometime 2 years ago. So yeah, sure. Reach out there if you want to not hear from us.
I kind of imagine that my page update on Facebook is just cobwebs.
Is that an option? Because I want to click on that one.
No, I'm not going to click on it. I'm just going to assume it's happening.
I want spiders.
Like computer spiders are just building webs.
So yeah, so don't do that either.
Yeah,
but do follow us on Instagram. We'll be posting in our stories the movie that we're watching next.
Yeah.
It's coming soon. And we will be telling you about more of what we're doing with the film as we're finishing up Citywide and figuring out the next steps for it, as well as all the other work that we're making, which is apparently a lot.
Yeah.
There's so many things.
Never not something.
No. And we just want to say thank you for listening with us today. We had a really good time.
Yeah.
We enjoyed talking about Sister Sister.
Thank you. Have a lovely day, morning, afternoon, wherever.
Yeah. Do whatever you like and drink some coffee or tea or whatever makes you happy.
Yeah.
And we'll be back in about 2 weeks.
Yes.
Bye.